Welcome to Our Canada, Our Future. I'm Aaron Woodrick. Today we're going to be talking about global energy security and critical minerals. And to do that, I'm very pleased to be joined by Senior Fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, Heather Exner-Pirot. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. Very good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
I think maybe, Heather, we should just start with the obvious question about energy security. Most people don't think of energy in these terms. Why is it important to think of energy, not just in terms of how we use it, but in terms of a secure supply of it?
Well, the fact that we don't think about it, just goes to show that we've had such a reliable, affordable supply for so long that we've been able to take for granted. But we're all starting to think about it a lot more, aren't we? As that supply and that affordability comes threatened. And so, the classical definition is just reliability, affordability of supply, that you don't run out of it. And of course, we are all interrelated. Oil and gas in particular has been how we think about energy security, going back to the 1970s oil crises, when the Western economies wanted to become more independent from the Middle East for their needs for oil. But now it's now oil and gas is kind of rearing its head again. But it's more than that now. It's also going to be the things that we need for the green revolution. That's where the critical minerals come in.
Yeah, and when we're talking about energy security, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention that there's a war on in Europe, of course. And while Canada, we have an abundance of energy here, the same is not true of all of our allies. So, how do you see the war in Ukraine having sort of impacted countries' calculations when it comes to ensuring their own energy security?
Well, as they say, sometimes, nothing happens for decades, and then some things decades happen in weeks. And we've seen decades happen in the last few weeks. But before Russia invaded Ukraine, there was already an energy crisis coming. Europe was already feeling it. Asia was already feeling it, where gas prices were double, triple, quadruple what they had been. And European governments were all scrambling to subsidize or to, get some different supply. And that largely came from a dearth of natural gas, especially liquefied natural gas on the market. So we were already experiencing in parts of the globe that kind of pain. And now that it's hit North America, now that it's hit Canada, now we're talking about it too. But of course, global price, even though we have plentiful natural gas in Canada, the demand for that gas to other markets is increasing the price here at home also. So Europe is low on natural gas. They were already low, very dependent on Russia, I think for about 40% as a continent. Individual countries are much more dependent on that. And now trying to get off Russian oil as well, because that funds Russia's, strength in its military, and kind of allows it to keep funding these things and having these interventions. So now we are looking at a variety of things, how to get more LNG, non-Russian LNG into markets from the Middle East, from the United States, hopefully from Canada, eventually also, how to get more again, Western foreign friendly oil into markets so we can reduce the dependence on Russia. And then also how to transition a little bit quicker so that we can reduce dependence on oil and gas totally.
And speaking of that transition, I know you co-authored a paper recently talking about that. While everyone agrees that we need to transition off of fossil fuels over time, we're often glossing over some of those details. So I was wondering if you could sort of expand on what some of the practical considerations are in terms of an energy transition.
Yeah, so a lot of people are saying, well, this is a great, this is not an excuse, but obviously a catalyst to say, okay, let's get off of fossil fuels altogether. But we're finding it just isn't that easy. Fossil fuels have a great energy density. They're transportable. They're available on pretty much every continent. Refining capacity is available on every continent. We have tens of trillions of dollars of infrastructure built around fossil fuels. So to replace that it's taken decades. It's taken a century to build up. It's going to take decades to replace that. And solar and wind are good options in some cases, but they simply don't have the energy density. The other thing is the amount, people think, oh, the sun and the wind are free and they kind of, just come manna from heaven. But to translate sun and wind into electricity that you can dispatch on demand, that you can store, requires minerals. And so, for example, the World Bank has warned or told us that we're going to have to quintuple the amount of mining we're doing in some minerals like lithium, it'll be, 10 times what we're using right now. So there's a lot of work ahead to have that transition, and there's simply nothing you can do in the short term.
Yeah, great thoughts, Heather. We're going to take a short break and continue talking about energy security.